everyone, this is Crypto Gordon Freeman, the Free Man, and I want to take a look at the Bitcoin price chart with you and go over some things. And I don't like to make predictions that I think are just off the cuff and not based in anything. So what I prefer to do is to actually look at the price chart with you and go over what it is doing and what I think the real world elements are that can affect its price going forward. So first of all, I have this loaded up on a 4-hour candle. And this is from 2020 going into 2021. So looking at where we've been, I'm going to widen this so that you can see. What I'm looking at is what was Bitcoin doing before something caused a huge price movement upwards. And obviously, we went through a lot that could affect price in 2020. So here's where we were, and this was actually a pretty positive, pretty hopeful looking move forward. You may not remember this, but Bitcoin rising to about 13,005, 13,600, and this was around June 2019. Now that only hit a low here in October of around 7,500. But you can see that this was more than average volume. These lines down here are showing you every 4 hours what the maximum amount of Bitcoin was being traded. And this is on Pionex, which gets a pool of volume from Binance and I believe Huobi as well. But you can see that here after the summer was over, just boom, a really big drop in the volume. Not much going on, which I think is very interesting when we know what would happen with the coronavirus going from February into March. So these huge spikes were the sell-off, and this was what, March 10, 12? Yeah. So this was the worst day after several days that were also bad on the stock market. This was where we had, gosh, I didn't remember it going down below 3,800, but I guess right around 3,800 was our low point. Boy, that was the buy-in of the century, was it not? That was like the last time somebody could get the equivalent of, buying Bitcoins for $1 before the Mt. Gox stuff went where it went. But so from that low point, we start what I see in this range over here. Bitcoin was headed towards going over 10K again, in my opinion. It would have come down here, done a little bit of this, and then probably done a little bit more of a climb. What you see right here in this area in May, June, July of 2020, I believe is what we should have been seeing from just a casual dip there. So we probably would have been back around 12,000 here, around 14,000 here, and then whatever happened from there would be a good $5,000-$6,000 higher in price action if it were not for the coronavirus scare dip. So what we have is a incredibly fast, incredibly resilient recovery, essentially going down from 10K back up to 10K in just a matter of 3 months. What we have seen recently today, over the past 2 weeks in Bitcoin, is a dunk down to 29,000, recovering back up to just over 40. So I think that pattern is reminiscent. I want to keep looking at the visuals here and to see, there's the big sell-off volume again. Here's where we start to see the first peak, and that was around 12. So like what I was saying before, we had already seen in the previous summer going up to 13.5. So I feel certain that if we had not had the coronavirus stuff, this 10K would have been about 12, and this 12K would have been about 15 or 16 going in. So just looking at the natural results of what happens in the world, you cannot ignore the importance of knowing your day-to-day news, even as it rolls out over months. So here is the early announcement and rollout of PayPal. Now, PayPal handling crypto was supposed to be a pilot program through November, December, and then January would be the launch. They went right from the pilot program around this range into going ahead and releasing it and putting it into people's US PayPal crypto wallets. So it was already there. So pilot program, Schmilet program. They just, after a month of having it there, they just went ahead and made it available, and people kind of found it early themselves. And then they did their explainer videos and their Q&A and their frequently asked questions, etc. So we had a peak right about 20,000, since that is our all-time high from before. It only makes sense that there's a huge sell-off there. People get scared that something's not going to maintain what it was doing. And so then look how quick this slope upward again happened. This was from 1126 to 1130. So just half a week. We almost made 20K again. There's a sell-off of about $4,000 or $5,000. And then we broke through that value just barely higher. And then when I look at this activity here, this is not necessarily predictable. This is not something that is just going to be chart-based reactions to things. Things got a little slim in this range, only about maybe 2 or 3% change for an entire week. Okay. That accumulation definitely bounced off of that price, and now we finally have our new all-time high. Once it hit that new all-time high, these patterns where it goes sideways were shorter and shorter. So that doesn't surprise me. So this is going into the new year now. We had this spike to 28. We had this spike all the way up to 35, 34, 7. And then it sold down to about 28. And I'm sure a lot of bears were saying, now we're going to have a bear market. So we had our biggest jump ever to 41. And that's what we just saw this week. We have now recovered that giant peak. It matters where that buy-in came from, because all this money is money that is either trapped in markets or sold out into something else, not to return, or something that people store on their wallets to say, listen, I've bought now. I'm not going to get rid of my Bitcoin until hell freezes over or anything else. Here's 29. After that 28, we have not tested 28 again. So you have this, is 30. This broke 29. This broke 29, and then a huge launch off point again. So here we have breaking 40K again. So that's that same range we have seen several times now have already happened in January and February, where we broke down to 29, broke up to 40, broke down to 29, broke up to 40. What happened next? Went to 47 and didn't really stop going down for 2 weeks. We broke the 50s. We went up to 58 for the first time. New all-time high, 61. Then it came down to the 50s. New all-time high, 64.9, almost 65,000, so 64.9. And then it came all the way down to about 51. So there we broke under 50 again, around 47, and I remember that well. It was in mid to late April. And from that point, we have been hit with a series of things like the Elon Musk scare tweets, scares and regulation. Each of these major dips have coincided with something in the news. They have not just been, Bitcoin's ready to do this move, Bitcoin's ready to do that move. No, there's something issued about stable coins. There's something issued about tightening KYC rules. There's something issued about trying to ban in China 3 different times that happened. So I see where we are right now is as incredibly bullish sentiment for Bitcoin in what I think has been a pretty continuously bearish market trying to prevent that sentiment from getting through. So that gives you a history of what we're looking at leading into this zone. So I do actually think that it could continue to have a bit of a downtrend, but I don't see like a massive sell-off. But I think that The question is whether it breaks under 30K again. And I'm not seeing that right now. I think that I could see it breaking under 35 and people saying, oh, if it's going to do that, it's going to go down to 28. And if 28, then 23. There are some people saying that Bitcoin always, within this 2-year period of time, does an 85% drop before it starts to recover and hit before it starts to hit new all-time highs. Maybe that's the case, maybe not. That's the kind of thing that I don't want to predict because too much can happen in the news that is not just something you look at a chart on. But if I'm looking just at the patterns here, this was very bullish. That's a lot to buy in a short period of time. And there was barely any drop off there before going up again. Same thing here. I mean, that it takes a lot of money and a lot of buying energy to get up several $1,000s in the market. So this is kind of a tapering off. It doesn't surprise me, but I could see it going below the 36 range. I could see it going below the 35 range. I don't think that it settles in the low part of this. If you look from June to July 23rd, we have kind of an average around 33,000. I think that we're going to remain above that average. There's no way to know for sure, but this is what my gut of watching this for a few years is telling me. This is a pretty heavy sell-off from that little peak, and it doesn't look as big of a deal as it is. But if you look right here at the volume, it's been sell volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different times out of about 16 times. So 13 times 4 number of hours, more than 50 hours of that, about 80% of that has been ending up selling off. So I think that it's possible we see 34, 35, 36. Nothing would surprise me in Bitcoin ever, anywhere, anytime. But what I'm seeing is that we could kind of find a new average in the 35, 36, 37 range that was stuck in the 33, 35 range. And that's not such a bad thing. Over the weeks to come, I could see us breaking. I always find it more interesting to know where things are averaging out than where the peaks and dips are. So if it takes several weeks of selling off something, you really don't know what the value is. And if it takes several weeks of just going up and up and up, you really don't know where the value is. The value is when it holds a position and people continue to see, the sentiment is that Bitcoin was worth this and it continues to be worth that amount. After a while of sitting, it's going to start selling off or going back up again, but those are temporary moves. What we want to know is over time, what do people think it's worth? So now I'm going to zoom out to the 1 minute. So you can see, I shouldn't have to increase the volume this much to be able to have it be more viewable. So volume has dropped very low except for these peaks. That's very, very, very low volume. Extremely low volume. I'm going to try to zoom in even closer. I would say the volume on Pinex is probably around half to maybe as little as a third of the volume on Binance because, they're getting a pull of volume from a few different places. But we see in here, 13, 14 Bitcoin. Here's a peak of about 50 Bitcoins. Obviously that's not a tiny amount of money, but these are very low amounts of volume. 5 Bitcoins being traded. 4 or 5 at a time. So it's not a scary stark amount, but it definitely is a drop from what we have seen in averages in the past. So I don't really see anything interesting to report in the minute to minute for now. And typically in the front half of the week, once we know what the sentiment for the stock markets and everything are going to be, there's not a whole lot of interesting thing that happens as the afternoon goes on. But the one rule of Bitcoin, and thus pretty much everything in crypto, is that the only benefit of knowing the rules is knowing what rules are being broken. So nothing is a hard set rule because everything changes. So I hope that you find that a little bit of a benefit, and I find it interesting. Hope you find it interesting too. And for now, Crypto Gordon Freeman out.